Good afternoon, Baskar. Warm welcome to you on behalf of APAC News Network. Very briefly, before we start, APAC News Network, we are a media organization with print, online, video, as well as event properties. And till now, our strength has been in government, healthcare, and education. In
Mhm.
fact, we are probably the only B2B media which in one last year has even hosted a Prime Minister Modi event also.
Mhm.
Now we are also expanding into IT and enterprise and BFSI and looking at ways how which the verticals can mutually synergize with each other.
Right.
We are headquartered out of Noida, and we have in India presence in Hyderabad, and outside India, we have branches in Singapore, Malaysia, and Dubai.
Okay.
So today, with Amagi, the discussion I would like to maybe once during the introduction, if you can touch upon the video streaming that you did for the NBC Olympics, the that project. But more importantly, I would like to understand in terms of the cloud-based solutions and services that Amagi offers.
Right.
Then yes, and then what sort of verticals and domains you are working with, and some of those use cases maybe understand what's the business and business model and operational model for some of these solutions. Perhaps to understand also what is your go-to-market strategy. So maybe the best way to start would be if you can trace the genesis a little bit and let us know bit on the history and how this came about. That would
Great.
perhaps be the best way.
Okay, great, Rajneesh. Thank you very much for taking that time. And so, company name is Amagi. My name is Baskar. I'm one of the co-founders of the company and the CEO of the company. Amagi's genesis started in 2008-9 timeframe when we started looking at how do we bring geo-targeted advertising on television. So, in fact, this was pre-IP days where we were trying to look at how do we target advertising on television. And in India, we started in India fundamentally for doing it on the traditional television. That's where we actually started as a company. Going forward, obviously, we built a large ad network in India, a television ad network, which enabled local businesses and larger advertisers to geo-target their advertising on large television channels. So, be it a ZTV or a Colors that you watch, you can have advertising only in a Mumbai or in a Punjab or in a Gujarat without having to buy a national spot. That's the core technology and the platform that Amagi evolved. Over time, that platform was evolving, but what we found out in 2013-14 timeframe is that we started building a lot of things on the cloud because the virtualization trend started. And Amagi was in the forefront of creating what I call a complete media ecosystem which can run on the cloud. So we were very early to that phase of what we thought was how can we run a complete broadcaster, TV channel, or a media operations completely on a virtualized environment. So to that extent, Amagi started investing in building a complete platform which can be suitable across the whole international spectrum. It was nothing to do with India, nothing to do with a particular geography, but completely across the globe. Can we go across the globe? So that was the transition that we made in about 2014-15 timeframe, where we expanded the business worldwide and started targeting every media company in the world, enabling their operations to move to the cloud, the virtualization of their operations from on-prem capital expenditure, expensive businesses, but completely onto the cloud. I think that was the core genesis of where we started, Rajneesh, on this front, right? Having said that, I think the biggest transformation that we see going forward is if you look at it on one side, you have a lot of content, right? Today, there's a content explosion that's happening. There's an amount of content that's getting created as tons and tons of content getting created. Very, very different subgenres, live, sports, news, a whole slew of content that's created on one end. On the other aspect we're seeing is lots of platforms or distribution points through which consumers are accessing their content, be it the likes of Netflix, Amazon Prime, to social like Facebook and YouTube, to advertising-driven platforms like the Rokus, the Samsungs in the US, for example. We are seeing a whole slew of different ways of consumption that's starting to actually evolve as well. What we are as a company is in a two-sided market, connecting the content creators with tools and technologies which allow them to distribute and monetize their content on these distribution platforms that I talked about. So we think there are tens and thousands of content creators and about 1,000 plus platforms that are available, and we're connecting these dots together through a technology platform which runs on the cloud completely. That's exactly what we're trying to do today.
Thank you. In fact, that I had planned as my second question. Now, obviously, initially, as you explained, the genesis was on television and for television advertising on program. Now,
Correct.
my question is, as you mentioned, there are now that same content or multiple content is being distributed and as well as consumed through either OTT platforms or the social media platforms and the likes. Now, my
Correct.
question then I'll just tweak in terms of as a platform like what Amagi provides. Now, when I, as a marketing agency, I devise an ad strategy, that content will be now in an omni-channel distribution mode.
Correct.
I'll have some content on television still,
Correct.
some on OTT, some on social media, and they
Correct.
will be spread across geographies also.
Correct.
So now that advertising strategy itself, devising that itself is a challenge, and the
Correct.
technology to support that diversification, that itself is a challenge. So how are you managing that?
So fundamentally, if you look at it, advertising has gone through a sea change, right? Given we are all connected to IP connected devices through which we are consuming content, could be mobile devices, could be connected television platforms, or what we call smart TV in the Asian context, for example. The whole landscape has changed in terms of how we are consuming content. So the advertising landscape has also changed, where now you can target advertisers almost on a per individual basis, which is kind of very distinctly different. So all your marketing campaigns and ad campaigns have to start looking at this new reality of being able to target at an individual level. Today, for example, we have platforms which allow you to understand the demographics of the customer, the geography of the customer, the affinity of the customer, the purchasing intent of the customer. All of this is mapped comprehensively. So if you're a marketer today, you have the possibility to finally target your customer, and not only through demographics, but also through all the purchasing intent. What have they looked at? The history of what have they been watching slash purchasing. You can put all of this together into a very nice marketing plan. There are very distinctly different companies which are evolving today, which are actually creating a marketing campaign mechanisms which are sophisticated. From an Amagi context, our job is once a campaign is created, we enable our customers to serve those campaigns in the most effective fashion to the right target audience. So that's exactly what we do. Because we work with hundreds of content owners worldwide, we have access to content of every subgenre that you can think of, right? From starting from action movies to sports to news to any sort of entertainment, documentaries, kids content, pet content, you name it, we have it, right? Reality shows and all of that. Now you suddenly have a capability, and we serve across a large geography. Obviously, US is our largest market where we can geo target almost at an individual zip code level, for example. Now, given this power of the platform and the sort of audiences that they bring in, now there are campaign and ad networks and exchanges today, which actually do the campaign planning, which allows you to leverage platforms like Amagi to target those capabilities today. I think that's where the big change has happened. Today, if you look at it, advertising in the OTT world, or what we call the online video world, is almost like a stock exchange where it's programmatic. That means everything is bid against each other. So when we start, for example, when an audience is watching a content or a break is going to happen in the next 5 seconds, we are we are actually going back to the ad networks and exchanges exactly like a stock exchange, saying, "Hey, we have a person in a particular geography with a particular demographics intending to watch an ad in the next 5 seconds. Can you let me know what is the best advertising to really put for this particular person?" At that point in time, the ad exchanges are actually going back to multiple demand platforms, which are actually waiting for ads. And they say, okay, now we have an opportunity. Who wants to bid? So there is a big real time bidding systems which are there, which bid for this particular opportunity of that particular opportunity that's coming up in the next few seconds. Once the bid completes, then the opportunity gets decided. It comes to us saying, hey, okay, it's going to be a Pepsi ad. Then we take that Pepsi ad and then actually seamlessly insert it to the consumer experience exactly on time, so that when the consumer watches it, it looks like a near continuous flow of events and on that screen. But behind that, there is a lot of transactions happening because we know that the audience is going to watch. We are actually predicting it, going back, talking to ad exchanges, bidding things happens, commercial discussions, decisions are made at that point in time in an instant of time, and then it's actually replaced here. Those are the activities that happens today, Rajneesh, in the system.
Okay, that's quite a complex network in terms of the. This is how the operational model you explain. I'm sure even more complex would be how do you devise a business model out of this, specifically from the Amagi context. So maybe a precursor to that question would you be working in these cases one with the platforms itself? It can be the TV networks or the OTT platforms or whoever. Are you working with the brands? Or are you working with the ad agencies? And what's the business model?
Okay, Rajneesh, there are three sides to this equation, right? One side is the content owner or the creator who wants to distribute the content. So we work with them very closely. That's our bread and butter from a customer standpoint. We do everything on behalf of them because we are a technology platform for them. We are distributing content to the platform or the distribution points, which are the likes of a Tata Sky or a YouTube or a Amazon Prime or a Roku equivalents, where we're delivering the content. So they are the platform side of things. Third is the advertising ecosystem. And I'm calling it an ecosystem because we work with multiple parties there. We do not directly work with a brand because there are brands today work with what's called demand side platforms. We are a supply side platform. It means what we do is we work with multitude of ad networks and exchanges to whom we would say whenever an opportunity comes, we are actually advertising the opportunity to multiple people. They in turn work with brands. The brands in turn bid, and then it comes to our system and it comes into the systems. So for us, it's a three-sided market. One is an ad ecosystem, one is the content ecosystem, another is the distribution ecosystem. So we have partnerships. We have maybe close to 100 plus partnerships and platforms. Obviously, more than hundreds of customers, which is the content creators, and possibly tens of different ad exchanges worldwide that we connect to today, for example. And all of this is happening in real time, Rajneesh. It's like every day you are having tens of millions of ad insertions happening pretty much every day, right? So we're talking about billions of impressions a month. So that's sort of the reality of a 24/7 engine that's running at the back end today to do that.
Um, Thanks. Another area arises out of here. Again, as you explained, these three parts of the ecosystem, and these three parts of the ecosystems are also in multiple geographies. Now, in terms of the content, one, the how the content is created, and two, how the content is distributed.
Right.
There are different compliances in different geographies
Correct.
in terms of, and while even the advertising strategy around that will be enmeshed and impacted by many of these compliances. As a technology platform, how do you manage to conform with those multiple compliances?
It is a complex web of things, Rajneesh, to be fair, because again, if you look at it, one, there are content regulations. What content can be consumed by what customers? Because there is a whole content related regulations that we need to comply with. We should enable our customers to comply with. What I mean by that is because liabilities don't lie with us, but with the customers. But a customer, we need to make responsible stuff that is it child friendly content? Is it family friendly content? What timing of the content that you're doing? What sort of licenses do they have in terms of rights that they can actually place that content? So there's a whole slew of regulatory aspect, commercial licensing aspect of the content which needs to be complied with. So that's from a content standpoint, for example. The other aspect is in terms of platforms, there are clearly needs for geo blocking needs. For example, some of these content cannot go out of different geographies, for example. So we have to be able to restrict the geographies in terms of where the content is getting consumed from as well. So the platform side has consumption and consumption, geographic consumption related needs, for example, from a compliance standpoint. Having said that, the bigger aspect is advertising. Advertising is one of the largest complex beast here because of a lot of privacy concerns that have started coming in, right? So you have privacy and targeting has always been kind of orthogonal to each other, right? So lesser the privacy, more the targeting, or more the privacy, lesser the targeting was sort of the conundrum that we had. A lot of things are changing from a technology standpoint, but today, if you look at it, a lot of the governments have taken very, very aggressive approach progressively. Primarily, Europe has taken the whole GDPR compliance to the next level. We are seeing states in the United States starting to really look at it. So California started with something called a CCPA regulations. We're seeing 13 other states starting to really look at regulations as well. So it's a huge regulatory privacy aspect that people are trying to protect. So what it's going to be is a complex set of things that we need to go through. Technology is an enabler. Eventually, it's the policies and how do you kind of apply those policies in the real context and make things happen is going to be the most interesting thing to look at. I think it's an exciting phase for the whole industry because the industry is transforming, both in consumption patterns, in terms of the availability of content, the models of advertising and subscription that's transforming. But the bigger thing is that, given thanks to this privacy becoming an important concern worldwide, we are seeing the likes of Apple and Google have taken a very, very proactive step in trying to protecting privacy. Right, Apple's been a big supporter of that, and we're seeing Google also starting to look at it. So we're seeing a cookie-less world where I think it'll be very good for audiences and customers because I think that's the right way to look at it. As an end consumer, if I look at it, that's where we need to go to. Henceforth, there is going to be a big change in the technology landscape of how you would protect privacy and be able to target individuals. I think that's going to be the new game that's going to start. It's early days today, but in the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to be very exciting in terms of being in the what I call the right space from the audience. We went too far as an industry, or from an advertising standpoint, trying to micro target people by infringing on privacy, which I think is a very, very critical thing as we move forward. I think it's an exciting phase where we're getting into, where you will have a balance of privacy and targeting, which is going to be very interesting to look at.
So, how precisely, as a platform, you are looking to do this thing? This vis-a-vis that privacy, the technology to support. You have to target. You have to reach to the target audience, and the privacy question obviously is there. So, how as a technology platform you will manage that challenge?
There are many ways to do that, Rajneesh. Fundamentally, given the question is, we are trying to look at what I think Google has enabled something called Google Flock, FLOC is a new platform that they've come in. Very similar to that is what we're looking to do in the connected television world, where we start creating cohorts of consumers. See, what is the problem? We don't want to expose a single individual household or a customer directly to an advertising platform. What we need to do is to see what do we want to transact. We're going to tell the advertisers saying, hey, you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity of a particular characteristic of an individual or a household. We don't need to say exactly the household is the IP address. We don't need to tell them their address. We don't need to tell them their exact persona. We don't need to identify the persona in its uniqueness, but only look at them as a cohort or what I call a group individual in terms of their affinities. So I think there's a great way to do audience protected targeting, which will be highly effective. It won't be as effective. Obviously, it is not going to be as effective as what it is today. But the question of effectiveness comes to, is it truly effective in terms of, because if you look at digital advertising as well, I don't think we are able to measure the effectiveness of conversion with respect to an audience watching it to that extent. So we believe the future is about protecting privacy by creating cohorts and groups of affinities rather than trying to target them on an individual basis. That's where we think the direction we are trying to take, Rajneesh.
But once these cohorts and groups comes up, how will the some sort of analytics be used on them so that there are very meaningful insights? Because otherwise, for advertisers, just a very generic cohorts and groups that target will not be very. So, how will the advertisers gain those meaningful insights? They will want it from a platform like you only.
Correct, correct. No, no. What we want to do is, because it is in our because we are serving content to the end consumer, Rajneesh. We want to be cognizant of the fact that we don't want to expose the consumer directly. But you have the viewing behavior of the consumer in a much more broader fashion. For example, I might come to your house, maybe if I track your home, I might know that Rajneesh is a sports lover. Maybe you have kids, and I know you're actually watching, you're a parent of a maybe 5-year-old child, because I know what sort of content getting watched. You might be a news buff, maybe an auto car enthusiast. I know so many information about you. Maybe you have a pet lover and a pet at home because you're watching some channels. I have information which I can actually put together, but I don't need to expose Rajneesh as an individual or an IP address of Rajneesh as an individual, but actually go to an advertiser and say, you know what, I have an opportunity of a person living in this geography, actually has pet at home and has a 5-year-old child, and is an auto enthusiast and a sports lover, watches soccer a lot. Now tell me what you can do with that person. Instead of delivering an IP address and say, hey, you know what, I've got an IP address, now tell me what it is. That's the difference, Rajneesh, in terms of what we see by protecting that whole capability.
Okay. And very briefly, can you explain in terms of the underlying technology that you work upon, and maybe also a little bit explain upon your internal infrastructure in terms of the resources, skilled resources, and how do you function?
Okay. So if you look at it from a technology standpoint, Rajneesh, we are a media technology company. All our systems run on a public cloud infrastructure, the likes of Amazon and Google and others, right? So that's where it actually runs. What do we do? We kind of operate on a lot of content, right? So we have thousands of hours of content or tens of thousands of hours of content coming into our platform. We process that content for multiple different things, right? From quality checks to extracting subtitles to deep scanning video to understand much better information to transcoding those formats to so many different things happen. We then composite it with video, composite it with graphics, composite with subtitles, composite with multiple audio tracks. All of those capabilities happens in house, for example. Eventually, we make it distribution ready for an end consumer. If it's live sports, sports comes from multiple locations. On ground sports, coming from different stadiums. We have commentaries coming from different sources. We put all of this together and eventually be able to create one stream that we are delivering to the distribution platforms today. So there's a lot of work happening at the back end. And obviously, we talked about the advertising part where we do targeted advertising requests as well happening, for example. All of this is happening across, today we run about more than 550 plus channels across the globe. We are one of the, arguably the largest media platform today, which actually has so many channels that are getting launched. We run across 40 countries. That means pretty much every time is prime time in our system because every part of the geography we are running, right? So we have a 24/7 knock out of Delhi, which actually is managing and operating this whole platform pretty much on a minute by minute basis in terms of what's happening. We have thousands of servers running on the cloud because it's just spinning up, spinning down, depending on the sort of the complexity of what we do, right? We are close to about 100 petabytes of people consumption content that's happening out of our systems almost on a per month basis. We have billions of insertions and impressions that are happening on a per month basis and hundreds of millions of hours of consumption that happen. So it's almost like a content factory, Rajneesh. That's what I call it, right? It's like almost like a factory running in the back end, just that none of us see it because we see only our small piece of the content that we are watching in the most seamless fashion. But a lot of things at the back end that's happening. So close to about 150 people, technology teams are working on it. We have 100 plus operations team working on it, almost 24/7 to keep all of this running and keeping all of this nicely working across the globe. That's sort of the context here, right? So we have engineering, technology development, we have operations teams, we have monitoring capabilities, we have onboarding systems which actually allow people to onboard into our systems. All of that happens seamlessly at the back end.
And what about the storage? Since we are generating so much content, you need to archive that content also. So, what
Absolutely, we
about
do
the
that as well.
storage?
Huge amount of storage. Rajneesh. We do have, because again, video is one place where we have to store a lot of content, process a lot of content because of graphics and video and others. And network is also high because we need to give it to every consumer. That means we have to pipe it to every consumer. So it's three, both compute, storage, and network are at very high amount of consumption that we do today.
And specifically, if we look at the India market, where So, how's your, if I may say, the exposure and working with the Indian market? And this will be across all the delivery medium.
Okay, so India has been a relatively newer market, Rajneesh, for us as a company in this technology platform. Because when we started transitioning to this technology, the biggest disadvantage in India was obviously cloud infrastructure was not very mature. Internet was not very mature at that point of time. Consumption was not as high as what it is today, for example, when we started off with this whole thing. So we kind of started in the US, which is even today, our 70% of our market is actually US. Then we have Europe market, and then we actually come to in India, right? So that's where we moved to India about relatively just now to the market. That's we moved, right? Having said that, if you look at it from an India context, we are quite excited because of the sort of different things that are happening across the country actually today. We already know that we have Hotstar has been a great platform. We've seen Prime coming in, Netflix coming in, YouTube has always been bigger. Geo has kind of democratized the whole consumption patterns for all of us. So I think, and now we have the connected TVs like Samsung and Xiaomi and LG trying to bring in television sets which are IP connected. So we're seeing an entirely new generation of possibilities that are coming to happen here, Rajneesh. So we are at a very early phase, if you will, in terms of adopting those technologies back in India. We are in discussions with multiple different players in the country. We have not yet launched anything seriously from a country standpoint. Having said that, we do work with the likes of Z Television and Viacom 18 and NDTV and Times Network, where we're enabling their content to be distributed worldwide. So we are already they are our customers today, and they've been customers for most 4 5 years, where we are taking their content and delivering it to the US diaspora or to Africa or Europe. All of that we do on the cloud today already. That we do today, example. But what we see is the new change. In fact, we kind of relaunched in India about 3 months back, where we're starting to really engage with customers here and starting to look at a platform strategy here where we can actually drive some of these.
Okay. So, you already mentioned some of the content creators in India that you're working with. Overall, I'd like to understand now, one globally, you said you work with basically, if I may say, three constituents in the overall ecosystem. So I just wanted to understand overall globally, how many customers you have, and what would be the roughly the proportion across those different constituents, and also to understand how many customers are there in India, since you are about 3 months operational here. So how many customers are there in India?
So overall, Rajesh, just to give you context, we have about 170 plus customers, and it's counting every week, right? So we're kind of growing as a company. So logos get added pretty much every week, every quarter. We're having more logos added. About 170 plus customers. These are a spectrum of customers starting from the likes of NBC, Discovery, Fox. These are some of our customers. A&E, for example, is a customer to the extent of maybe smaller customers, right? Then you have likes of TasteMade and Cinedime and a whole slew of customers in the US that we have. These are all content creators or TV channels, which are our core customers. So 80% of all our business comes from the content creators or the TV channels. 20% of the business comes from what we call platforms, the likes of Roku, Samsung, YouTube TV, or Comcast equivalents, which actually provide the revenue. Right, that's the way it's split across Rajneesh. Now, if you look at it, 70% of our 74% of all our revenues comes from US today. That's our biggest market, right? Followed by Europe, followed by APAC, and then India, because India is small for us. Coming back to India we have about 5 6 customers today, for example. But that's expanding, right? As we start, I think there will be a lot more expansion. Obviously, given we are a local company here, we have a lot more access and more comfort in being able to drive that change. I think in a year's time, we'll be in a much more larger position to talk about India itself as a bigger market, right? So today it is small for us.
Uh, Another thing I would like to understand is what's the GTM strategy that you follow, and what are some of the initiatives since you approach all these, again, those three constituents in the ecosystem. So, what is the GTM, and specifically, will it be the same GTM also in India?
So GTM's been evolving as a company. As we grow in size, I think the GTMs are very different that we see, Rajneesh. Early days, obviously, first we defined the geographies that we want to be in. We targeted feet on the ground. So first was the sales teams, which are actually going in feet on the ground, talking to customers and trying to do it. Primarily TV channels and content creators and owners. That was the first step that we did, right? Once we started distributing to platforms, platforms became a channel for us because they were actually talking to other customers saying, go to Amagi if you want to. So there's a word of mouth ecosystem that evolved fundamentally from a platform standpoint. So platforms act as a very good partner for us, whom actually are driving some of the discussions with content creators, example. So that's the second step that happened. Third thing where we're seeing right now is a channel partnership strategy where we are actually tying up with multiple sales channels worldwide. These are non-Amagi companies which are either system integrators, consultants who are very cloud consultants who are very, very entrenched in different geographies. This is the likes of Latin America, for example. We're doing it in Australia. We're doing it in Korea, for example. We're doing it in Japan. So we have very strong channel partnerships that we're involving, including our own cloud partners. Cloud partners like AWS and Google Cloud are strong channel partners for us because when they are talking to customers, customers need a full solution. They don't want a cloud. They want a full solution. So they do partner with the Amagi and provide it as an end-to-end solution for those capabilities. Those are the places where the channel partners are happening. So going forward, it's going to be a strong channel partnerships, third-party partnerships that we do, feet on the ground, and leverage our platforms to be able to kind of get to new customers. That's the sort of the expansion strategy. In India, it will again be a mix of these three, largely because we know pretty much all the large content creators in the country by just buying in India, being in India, you know them. We would obviously start with a direct strategy with some of them and eventually kind of expand into a channel partnerships, which I don't think is needed, relevant in an India context today for us. So I was talking about the GTM model where we talked about the channel partnerships that we're doing today across the globe, including cloud vendors, system integrators, and third party who are actually helping us in different geographies. Having said that, from an India context, our first strategy is really direct sales because we pretty much know everybody in the industry, at least from media industry. We've been working here for long enough. So we're going to start with the direct sales strategy, then start moving into more distribution and channel partnerships through which we'll actually be addressing that going forward, Rajneesh. That's the plan.
And also, as conclusion, I'll ask, looking forward, maybe over the next 3 to 4 quarters, what are going to be the key focus areas? And that I can talk about in terms of geographical expansion, in terms of technology, in terms of new channel partnerships, or anything. What are going to be the 3, 4 key areas where you would be focusing on?
Oh, for us, Rajneesh, I think the next 4 quarters is pretty chock-a-block busy, and the reason is because the market is transforming and growing dramatically, right? So we kind of in the middle of really executing on a very broad set of roadmap items which are actually happening. So from a product and from a market standpoint, the biggest transformation that we're seeing is live sports and news are coming to OTT platforms big time. That means there's going to be broad-based live sports and news that's happening, right? Sports, we are trying to start to cover county sports, college sports, school sports, not only IPL but everything around it, right? And the number of sports items also is changing, and thanks to like things like Olympics, which have changed the number of games that we're all getting interested in. Hopefully, you're going to see this expansion of different games and sports that's happening, and this is worldwide that we're seeing this. That's a big, big advantage for us from a live sports and news. So one of our big efforts is live sports news. That's number one. Number two, if you look at it from a targeted advertising standpoint, we think we've been all doing video advertising. We think it's going to be graphics and interactive advertising and others that we want to kind of expand into. So we have a packed roadmap of trying to bring those capabilities in terms of personalization, not only for content and advertising, but bring in richness of graphics and capabilities from an advertising standpoint. That's the second part that we're really focusing on today, right? And we're expanding the geography. So we started off, as I told you, in the US, then went to Europe. We launched APAC, relaunched APAC pretty much 6 months back. We got our first head of Asia and then started off with that. We announced India just about 3 months back. So we're kind of starting to expand across. We have set up in LATAM, we're in France and Germany. We just started in Canada. So we're kind of expanding the whole partnerships across the whole places and actually creating a subsidiaries across the globe. So it's going to be quite exciting because both geographical expansions happening, customer expansions happening and product expansions happening simultaneously. So it's going to be an interesting time for us, Rajneesh, as a company.
Okay, so that this Olympics coverage was also part of that live sports focus
Absolutely,
that you
absolutely,
mentioned.
absolutely. We were very excited about this whole Olympic stuff because obviously NBC is one of the top tier TV networks in the world. So when you're talking to them, we were able to kind of create this whole experience from the Olympic standpoint. It's a very one of the most dynamic environments from a live standpoint that we were addressing. So that's a very big part of the whole equation, Rajneesh, that we'll be looking at. So we're quite excited about what we've done for Olympics, and hopefully we're going to use that as a basis to kind of expand our capabilities going forward in the live sports arena.
Thanks a lot and appreciate your time. And it was great talking to you.
Thanks, Rajneesh. Thank you very much.